Where are all the aliens? Since evolution happened here on Earth, there therefore must be more evolution, and therefore more species popping up all over the galaxy. And given that our solar system is quite young, as solar systems go, you'd expect that if evolution is at all likely, then by the sheer weight of mathematical probability, there should be far more evidence of previous or even concurrent alien civilizations in our observable galaxy. So where are all the aliens? That is the question that the Fermi paradox seeks to answer, and as such, the game The Fermi Paradox should be interesting for us to ponder the question, should a Christian play it? But first, on to the gameplay. The Fermi Paradox is a galactic gardening simulator, and before we go on too far, let me point out it is still in active development, so graphics and features will change, and if they change significantly, we'll revisit the more polished game in future. But as for now, you're given a double handful of habitable star systems to watch over. A more secular review might suggest you're playing God over these planets, but, well, no. Then time begins to move, and the game will slowly adjust the planetary system's stats behind the scenes until it hits let's call it a turn, if you will, a crossroads in the flow of fortune, and they will pause, allowing you to make a choice which flare to collect. Initially, these flares are just a chance for you to collect the game's currency and affect certain systems generically. But eventually, a new species will evolve, and you'll be given the choice which kind will come forth out of the muck and mire, be it a squid species, or the big bears, or a dino race, or the hamsters of Dogstar. This new species will have a tech level, population count, natural resource supply, likelihood of doing harm, and ethics rating. And from there on out, if you select a flare from this system, you'll get a real choice. There are blank flares which just progress time and give you a single currency, or negative flares that decrease the species' stats but give you 2 space bucks to spend, or positive flares that boost the species but don't give you any money, or a random flare which does exactly what it says on the tin, something random. Now, this new species will grow and expand and learn, and eventually come to a crossroads in its development. It might be they've progressed to a new tech level and need to know whether to use their skills for good or for greed, and you'll be given the choice. Or maybe they find out a new supply of resources, or they've run out of resources, or they've got an interesting idea about music, or a war has broken out, or whatever. You'll get notified and given a chance how to nudge the species. And here is where those space monies come into play. You see, the best option might give them a great boost in tech or population or safety, but it will cost you some of your hoarded synthesis points, as the game calls them. In some cases, quite a few points. Or you may have a neutral choice that only benefits them a little, or only hurts them a little, or you can take the last choice that hurts their civilization, but gives you a bucket of space credits. Why would you ever do that, you might ask? Well, eventually, you'll have multiple species that you're shepherding to greatness, but only one wallet of space fortune to dole out. So, you might choose to let one failing civ die out completely so you can save another, or even keep a species just on the brink of collapse so you can regularly harvest galactic karma from them to allow your favorite civ to live in the lap of luxury. Because eventually, even the most advanced civ will have some kind of crisis. Either running out of resources, or a war of ideals breaks out, or maybe they just have a great idea and you need a ton of credits to push that idea into reality. And if you don't have them, well, stink. As the game progresses, species will come and go. More resilient species will flourish and send out signals to their neighboring star systems, or even send out colony ships and conquer or develop new worlds. Each of these worlds will host a civilization that can differ from its mother civ and grow peaceful or hostile or expansionist or desperate. They may die out on their own right, or their mother world might, or you might shepherd enough civilizations into a high enough tech level that they can dare to finish one of the grand unifying technologies and end the game. This end might be a peaceful federation of worlds that bands together and lives in harmony, sharing resources in a pan-galactic utopia. Or like my first game, you might have one planet hyperspace tunnel into every other star and blow it up so they can finally have some peace and quiet around here. You might actually miss it as you play the game if you're focused on the stats and all of that winning nonsense, but the game keeps track of the choices you make and tells a complex story of each culture. If you allow corruption to fester because you need the points, they'll remember it, and it might cause a war to break out later. The rebels flocking to the banner of "Remember the injustice and down with the daimyo!" This might lead to a good turn of fate, or could lead to a dystopian future for your civ, but the game keeps track of this and actually lets you read it if you want to. So you can hover over a single planet and shepherd it closely, and let every other race fend for themselves, or you can ignore it and let the dice fall where they may. The devs have said that eventually the game will give you a grand history of the galaxy when you finish the game, but I thought it was a really cool story-building element, and the fact that you can forget that you gave the slugs antimatter weapons, and then they still have those weapons years and years later as they turn them into spaceship engines or blow themselves up in a civil war, is just a really nice touch. And the fact that if you don't care, you don't need to care to play the game is a great feature as well. But the main question we ask for each of these reviews is, should a Christian play Fermi Paradox? And just as a reminder, as a firm believer in individual soul liberty, my answer is very likely to be different than yours, and that's fine. I only provide you food for thought so that you can make the choice for yourself. Nobody in the log pile will judge you if you decide differently. That's between you and God. Right out of the gate, though, we run into a big issue for many. A literal reading of the book of Genesis contradicts the entire premise of the game. It denies evolution entirely and gives the solution to the Fermi paradox that there aren't any aliens because God didn't create them. Now, for many, that is a deal breaker, and if that's you, then your answer should be really easy, because the game is entirely given over to the worldview that things evolve, and the Big Bang, and billions of years and all that. Since I grew up watching Star Trek and reading classic sci-fi, I'm used to enjoying fanciful mythologies and suspending my disbelief for a time as a foil for a good story or game, so it's not a problem for me, but if it is for you, I hardly understand. Do give this one a pass. If you're still here, let's soldier on. There aren't any depictions of violence that we noted while playing, though many of the stories were about wars breaking out or insurrections or rebellions. They were never depicted or detailed. There's no nudity or questionable music or depictions of drug use or profanity that we could find. And boy, what a shock that was. It seems that even the most far-flung space opera or fantasy race still knows what naughty words to use or who to blaspheme, even if their mythology doesn't depict a hell or tell of who Jesus is. None of that here, praise the Lord. There is one other niggling issue that we ran into in the game, and that's the cultural issues. In this case, quite literal cultural wars. Several of the cultural events that popped up when the races got into the middle of their ascent to utopia are interesting. And that's to be expected, that a game made by people in the world would include an alien race that discovers how to fluidly change their gender, or struggles to answer the question of AI sentience, or throws off the shackles of deity worship, or dabbles in euthanasia or eugenics, and then gives you the choice on how you'll proceed. That's all to be expected. And I'm sure the devs put those in the game with a lot of thought and care and concern, but several of the choices are given with a distinct good answer that will progress the race towards a utopia. Far more if you choose to encourage gender fluidity, or atheism, or the freedom to end lives. They come from a well-intentioned but unbiblical worldview, and so can't help but believe that these freedoms are actually good. Let me remind you of 1 Peter 4, verses 1 through 4, which says, "Since therefore Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same way of thinking. For whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live for the rest of the time in the flesh no longer for human passions, but for the will of God. For the time that is past suffices for doing what the Gentiles want to do, living in sensuality, passions, drunkenness, orgies, drinking parties, and lawless idolatry. With respect to this, they're surprised when you do not join them in the same flood of debauchery, and they malign you. But they'll give account to him who's ready to judge the living and the dead. I wouldn't say that there are more than a few instances of this throughout the game, and once you get past about the midway for a civilization, they turn to other things, and it might be a good opportunity to talk to your kids about these issues and explain what the Bible teaches about them, but just know that they're there, and they seem to steer the player towards a good choice. Other than those issues noted, the game doesn't overspend its welcome like some Civ games do, sucking up your time. It isn't terribly expensive at $20 current price and seems to have plenty of replayability. If you're looking for an interesting take on a light Civ building game, then maybe Fermi Paradox might be something you want to play. And if you're looking for more Christian reviews, chill playthroughs, and no-fluff game guides, please subscribe and give us a like, and we'll play with you again next time.